Good morning. There's a storm coming. Just hang on. Okay. I'm prepared. See, I'm Miss Terry, and I get the privilege of telling the kids here and there a story. And last week, I told a story about a miraculous catch of fish. And this week, I have another story about those fishermen. See, Jesus had been traveling around and talking and preaching, and he's kind of tired. And he says, guys, let's go across the lake. Now, my friends back here who have been spending some time at the lake, this is not a little lake. This was actually the Sea of Galilee. So they get in the boat, and they're going across, and Jesus has been preaching and teaching, and he's tired. And so he goes in the back of the boat, and Mark tells us in chapter 4 that Jesus puts his head on a cushion, and he goes to sleep. And meanwhile, the disciples are trying to take this boat across the Sea of Galilee, and it gets stormy, and the wind's blowing, and the waves are coming. Now, these are not fun little play at the beach waves. Like I had some friends who've been to the beach recently, and it's a lot of fun to play in the waves. These were not those kind of waves. These were like 30-foot waves, like the waves, the water's coming over, and it's filling up the boat. And there's so much water in the boat that the boat is starting to sink. And they're getting more and more nervous, and the boat is rocking, and the waves are coming, and the rain is coming down, and the boat is filling, and it's sinking, and finally the disciples go to the back of the boat, and they say, Jesus, don't you care we're going to drown? And he kind of wakes up, he's got that sleepy eye in his face, and he says, peace, be still. And all of a sudden, it's that quiet. There's no more wind. There's no more waves. There's no more rain. It's just perfect still. And he says, where's your faith? And the disciples look at each other, and they say, who is this man? Even the wind and the waves do what he says. Okay, so they're kind of freaked out, and they go on and they spend more time watching Jesus preach and heal people, and they start to learn more about him and spend more time with him. And a couple weeks ago, Mr. Jason told us a story about how there were 5,000 people that Jesus and his disciples fed with 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. This story comes right after that. So they just fed all those people. And Jesus says to his disciples, hey, go get in the boat, and I'll catch up with you. I'll dismiss the people, and you guys just go. So they did exactly what Jesus said. They got in the boat, and same lake, still Sea of Galilee. Okay, so they go across, and they're in the boat, and Jesus dismisses the people. And then he does something that Jesus was known to do. He goes up in the hills to spend some time with God, his daddy, because that's how he stayed connected to God. He spent time praying. And so Jesus was up in the hills praying. And in the meantime, his disciples are out in this boat. And Jesus says, they're in trouble. So it's gotten dark, and the disciples are out there, and the wind is picking up, and the waves are picking up. And Jesus says, I need to go to them. So 3 o'clock in the morning, when all good people are asleep. But Jesus has been praying because he's that kind of guy. So he goes and he goes out to them. Now, he does not take a boat to go out to them. He just starts walking on the water. So here he comes, walking in the water, and the wind and the waves, and the disciples are in the boat, and they're having a little bit of trouble, and they look up and they see this thing coming to them, and they go, ah! It's a ghost! Because, what else could it be walking on the water? And Jesus just calmly says, don't be afraid, it's me. They're like, and Peter, you remember Peter, he's the one who puts all his clothes on before he jumps in the water? Yeah, that Peter. Okay, so Peter says, okay, if it's really you, Lord, tell me to come walk on the water to you. And Jesus says, come. So Peter does something really crazy. He climbs out of the boat onto the water, looks at Jesus, just starts walking to Jesus on the water. And then he feels the wind, and he sees the waves, and they're splashing on him, and he's like, what did I just do? And he starts to sink. And he says, Jesus, help me. And Jesus reaches out and grabs his hand. He says, Peter, why are you afraid? Where's your faith? And Peter's like, so they walk back and they climb in the boat, and it gets all still. And there's no wind and there's no waves. And this time the disciples don't say, who is this man? They say, Jesus, you are the Son of God. Because see, they had spent time with Jesus, and they knew who he was because they had spent time with Jesus. And when you spend time with Jesus, you know he is the Son of God. And even when you're afraid, he is the answer. Now, remember, the disciples weren't just out on a boat trip. They were exactly where Jesus had told them to go. Jesus said, get in the boat and go across it. They did exactly what Jesus said. They were exactly where they were supposed to be, and yet they found themselves in a storm. Sometimes you can be doing exactly what you're supposed to be doing, exactly where you're supposed to be, and you find yourself in a storm, and Jesus says, I know where they are. I know they need me. And he comes to you right there in the storm, and he's with you. And when you've spent time with Jesus and you've gotten to know him, you know that he's there, and you know he is the Son of God, and all you can do is worship him. Let's worship.